And let me go ahead and share my screen. Can everybody see my screen right now?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I think we have one more person joining us. Hi, Linnea.
Hello.
Hey.
How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. It's good to see you. Sorry, I'm getting my life together real quick.
No, you're okay. Was also getting my life together. I was
Okay, good.
setting up the Zoom call, and then my computer was like, you can't open Zoom. I was like, okay, well, let's try again because I kind of need that tonight.
Yeah, mine definitely crashed during a meeting today. So I'm
Oh
with
my
you on
goodness.
that. Yeah.
Fingers crossed. I did ask the rest of the group, I want to confirm with you, I am recording this meeting for training purposes later. Is that all right with you?
Yeah, that's totally fine with me.
Okay, awesome. As I let everyone else know too, I do have my little 7-month-old puppy with me. So if you hear some whining or some squeak toys or whatever other tomfoolery, that's what's going on. But she seems to be relaxing, so hopefully it won't be too much of an interruption. And everyone can see my screen, right? Okay. All right, so let's dive right in for the sake of time. As you already know from our previous communications, my name is Melissa. I'm the volunteer coordinator and assistant manager at our Bloomington location. We also have a store manager, Dave, and 2 sales associates at the moment. But the rest of our day-to-day operations and the reason we're able to carry so much product is really because of our volunteer team. So thank you so much for your interest in joining us. I'm going to start off with the basics and dive right into our mission statement. So everyone's familiar that we're a nonprofit, correct? Hopefully, if you're volunteering. All right. So our mission statement is that Global Gifts is a nonprofit business committed to creating sustainable economic opportunities and safe and equitable working conditions for disadvantaged artisans and farmers around the world. So that's a lot of words and a lot of bold statements, but we have some follow-up statements on how we practically do that as an organization. So how do we accomplish our mission? First, we're providing vital, fair income and employment for people of limited opportunity. So unfortunately, what we buy on a daily basis often does not guarantee the human rights of the people who actually produce those goods, whether that's a purse that we're buying, our clothes, even the food that we buy. It's not guaranteeing an income or their human rights necessarily in that product that we're buying. Secondly, we're marketing that ethically produced and ethically obtained handmade products. So obviously marketing is a huge part of what we do to actually sell those goods and support artisans. Educating the public about the cultures and traditions associated with the items we sell. So yes, you all will help us with the day-to-day operations, but actually educating people about fair trade, why we exist, that is just as important. And lastly, helping consumers spend their shopping dollars in a way that support marginalized communities and environmental sustainability through the principles of fair trade. And we will talk a lot more about the principles of fair trade later in the presentation. So what is fair trade? Is anyone kind of already familiar with fair trade, or you kind of have an idea of what it might be?
Somewhat, yeah.
Somewhat.
Yes.
Kind of heard of it, maybe seen some labels on the groceries, that kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah, that's most people. It's a term they've heard, but they might have not necessarily dived into the principles or what that all entails. We kind of provided a definition from the World Fair Trade Organization. It is a big definition, but I think it summarizes it really nicely. So fair trade is simply a trading partnership. That's based on dialogue, transparency, and respect that seeks greater equity in international trade. It contributes to sustainable development by offering better training conditions to and securing the rights of marginalized producers and workers. So all of that means basically is that fair trade is more than just trading. Fair trade is a vision of business and trade that puts people and planet before profit. And with climate change being such a big issue, and with people not being paid for the work that they're doing, we have to start making a movement and making some changes that do prioritize those things. It fights poverty, climate change, gender inequality, and injustice. It is a proof of concept that showcases the enterprise models of the new economy. So that is kind of a fancy way of just saying that fair trade is kind of a movement and an experiment of what does it look like when we do provide fair wages, when we do protect the rights of people that have so far in history been exploited for the goods that we consume. And lastly, but definitely maybe the most important point, is that fair trade is not a charity. It's about empowerment. And we're definitely not saying that charity is a bad thing. Charity addresses immediate needs, like I need food, here's food. I need money, here's money. I need healthcare, here's healthcare. But fair trade is addressing the root causes of poverty so that it breaks the generational cycles of poverty so it doesn't happen now or in the future for the artisans and producers we're working for. So certainly some fair trade organizations have separate charities connected to what they do, but as a movement, fair trade is not in charity. It's about full empowerment and autonomy of the people that we are working with. Does anybody have any questions so far or comments? We're feeling
I have
good.
a question.
Yeah.
So I know I should probably know this because, not that the other people care or anything, but just because I worked at the other Global Gifts in Indy. And even though I would always tell people about fair trade and engage with our customers about it, it was always kind of hard for me to answer their questions when they are curious how we've been able to see people have like at the end of the day, like how the people themselves who make our products are, because I know some of the leaders at Global Gifts get to go on trips and meet with them, but like I didn't know how often we hear about their I don't know what the word is I'm trying to find, but how they've like been able to live better because of working with fair trade.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of a frequent roll-in with the wholesalers and vendors that we partner with. We're hearing all sorts of maybe personal stories or even updates about what's going in a certain country. And of course, you know, it's important to note that fair trade is not some magical solution that takes all their problems away. If they live in a violent country, they live in a violent country or area, right? So it doesn't fix all their problems, but there are a lot of stories, and something that we'll even share more in our volunteer training about how it has changed individual lives. And even with COVID is hitting countries really hard right now, like India. And Nepal right now are in a crisis with COVID, and that's certainly impacting their ability to make product, which is a huge part of how they get income. And so certainly there's challenges, certainly there's still poverty and hardships. And certainly, you know, when you're talking about countries and communities that have been dealing with extreme poverty for so long, it doesn't make them live certainly a Western or American lifestyle. And I think that's important to keep in perspective. But it does create a movement where there is actual income and more sustainable future for those individuals. So it's not an easy answer. And I know I blabbed a little bit, but I think when we do training and we talk more about these artisan stories, that'll really help you communicate with customers about how it is changing people's lives. So you kind of have those solid examples to go along with those conversations.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about the differences, more about fair trade versus free trade, or what would be like called traditional trade, that we're kind of just used to as the norm, especially in Western countries. And so free trade and fair trade sound really similar, and they get interchanged a lot, understandably, but they're actually almost the complete opposite. So with free trade, we are paying producers as little as possible. There's also many links in the distribution chain before that product ever gets to you where you buy it in a store. So there's all sorts of different companies that are trading to other companies, other transporters who are also wanting to make a profit. So many links in the chain that do want a chunk of that profit. You also price goods as high as possible, and then in order to make the best profit as possible off of a product. But in fair trade, you pay artisans, producers, and farmers as much as possible. We have close relationships and direct links with artisans and producers, and then we price goods competitively based on the market. And therefore, as people buy more product, we order more product from those artisans, and we sustain both businesses. And so what is the impact of just trying to change the model of how we do international trade? And so these are also things that you can talk about with customers. The impact is huge, and it ensures a lot of the basic needs that we sometimes often take for granted. So access to clean water, food security, medical care, and lastly, education. Education is a huge one, especially when it comes to fighting gender inequality and child labor. Because if the parents are actually getting an education on how to run a business, or they're making a fair income, those children don't need to work, and they can actually go to school. And in many families, if they can't afford for one child to go to school, unfortunately, the boys get preference before the girls. And so this helps ensure that girls get educations. And so education is a real huge component to this, especially when it comes to breaking cycles of poverty. All right, so who are the most affected? So we've talked a lot about vaguely marginalized communities, disadvantaged artisans and farmers, but what does that actually mean, and what do those communities look like? So these are areas often with no access to a marketplace. So internationally, statistically, often if you live in rural areas, you're at higher risk to experience poverty, because you don't have access, maybe in urban areas, to education and healthcare and social services. So you're basically isolated in a lot of ways. So fair trade reaches out and partners with a lot of rural communities internationally. Of course, areas of extreme poverty. Extreme poverty is defined as making, I believe it was like $1.70 or less a day. And there's nearly 1.8 million people internationally that fit in this category of extreme poverty. So of course, working with those communities that are not even making the regular poverty, but the extreme poverty areas. Thirdly, we have Indigenous people. So globally, Indigenous people actually make around 14% of the world's poor. So it is a similar situation if you know anything about the status of Indigenous people here in the United States or in Canada. Often Indigenous people in other countries are also experiencing and dealing with a history of genocide, isolation, forced into poverty in so many ways, racial discrimination. And so fair trade partners with a lot of Indigenous communities for that reason. Refugees. So these are people who are either facing discrimination based off their personal religious faith, or perhaps escaping like some type of natural disaster. It's obviously being displaced is a huge life change. So being able to have income is a huge life changer if you're moving to an entirely new country. Those with chronic illness or disabilities. And so just like here in the US, if you experience pain every day, if you have a physical or mental disability, it is a huge barrier to having income and landing a job. And so many fair trade groups work around people with certain disabilities and meet their needs to where they can actually work in a way that's comfortable for them and also get that income. And lastly, we have women. Over 88%, I believe at this point, of our artisans are actually women, which is a huge deal. You know, when women can actually be the source of income for their families, it creates independence for them. They do not have to depend on another male partner or male figure in their life. They can go forward to get an education, or they can escape situations that might not be so ideal for them. And women experience much higher rates of poverty than men do internationally. And this is often referred to as the feminization of poverty. So in general, these are the kind of communities and demographics that we are working with when it comes to the fair trade movement. Any questions or comments so far? Feeling good? Okay. And so within the fair trade movement, there are several layers of accountability. As a North American fair trade retailer, we are part of something called the Fair Trade Federation. In order to be fair trade certified business in the US or Canada, you have to be a part of the Fair Trade Federation. And so we pay our annual fees to be a part of that. They assess how much fair trade product we are carrying to meet those qualifications. And so they do the certification for businesses and retailers in this area of the world. And there are other models like the Fair Trade Federation in other areas of the world. And so with the Fair Trade Federation, there comes 9 different principles to actually be a certified fair trade business. And so these are often referred to the fair trade principles, and this is also what makes an artisan a fair trade certified group. And so we've already touched a lot about these, so I'll go through them really briefly. But firstly, we have create opportunities for economically disadvantaged artisans and producers. We've talked already about what those communities are. Secondly, transparent, accountable, and long-term relationships. So this is really important because in free trade, normal trade, traditional trade, whatever you'd like to call it, if a producer all of a sudden is not profitable, often those ties are cut pretty quickly. But in fair trade, there's a direct partnership where it's like, okay, we didn't have a profitable year. How do we market better? Is there something wrong with the product? Do we need to change that? Whatever the solutions are, it's a long-term relationship towards that goal. Thirdly, build capacity of farmers, artisans, and communities. So build capacity basically means we need to look at if there's any missing components to building a producer's independence. So are you ready to be a fair trade artisan group, but you don't have computers? Are you a fair trade farmer and you're expanding your farm, but you don't have the necessary tools? There are certain components that you need just to move forward and to improve your independence. And so that's what build capacity is about. Raise awareness about fair trade and educate customers. This is huge to further the fair trade movement. It's awesome to see those light bulb moments and awesome conversations happen right in the store. And that really helps not only our sales, but it feels good to know that maybe you've changed someone's perspective and they can go out and make change in their own purchases. Prompt and fair payment with open discussion of costs and pricing. Support safe and empowering working conditions free of discrimination and forced labor. So you all probably have heard of sweatshops, those kind of working environments. We're coming on the 7th or 8th anniversary of I believe it was in Bangladesh where the huge collapse of the sweatshop happened and so many people died. And so sometimes you hear these little blips in the news of like, oh, sweatshops, oh, this happened. And then it just kind of fades away. But these are constant issues, whether or not the news is addressing it or not. And so having an actual safe and cleanly and up to code working environment is a huge part of fair trade. Cultivate environmental stewardship. And so with fair trade, you have to be thinking about the environment and everything that you do. You'll notice when you come to the store that so much of our product is repurposed materials, recycled, environmentally friendly. And so that is at the core of so many actions that artisans do. My little puppy's being a little wild. There you go. Ensure the rights of children to security, education, and play. We have talked about that. Of course, getting rid of child labor ensures those things for children so that they can be children and go to school. And lastly, respect cultural identity and celebrate diversity. So this can look like a lot of different things. It can look like, you know, when you're a wholesaler's partnering with an artisan group in, let's say, Kenya, you know, the American wholesaler isn't trying to enforce American culture of ways of business or communication with their employees. It allows room to instill cultural norms and still do that and have full autonomy over the way that they run their business. Does anybody have any questions? There's not going to be a quiz on the 9 fair trade principles, but it is really good to dive in and think about what these actually mean, especially when it comes to communicating fair trade and why you value it as well. All right, we're feeling good. I'll keep cruising. All right, and then we have the World Fair Trade Organization. So this is kind of like the top layer of accountability in the fair trade movement. The Fair Trade Federation has membership with the World Fair Trade Organization. So WFTO sets the international standards of fair trade for all fair trade verification processes, and they also verify individual artisan groups internationally. All right, so how do we get product? I've added this slide just within the past year because I noticed there was a little bit confusion. It's like, okay, you're saying this word wholesaler and retailer and producer. What does that all mean? So hopefully this helps a little bit. First, we have the producer. So we have already talked about who that is. Those are the small artisan groups and farmers. Those are those demographics that we were talking about previously. In the middle, we have the wholesalers. So these are the people working directly with the artisan group that have a direct relationship. So they're working on product development. Obviously, what is trendy or looks good in Kenya might not be trendy and look good in Bloomington, Indiana. So that product development portion is crucial. Sharing marketing trends and data. And then the wholesalers have another important role to supply the product to retailers. And so this is what Global Gifts is. We are a fair trade retailer. We market artisan products to the public so that those products actually get sold. We educate about fair trade and the artisans. So we are really on the grounds furthering the fair trade movement. And our job really is to sell that product so that we can keep going back to those wholesalers and putting in those orders to support those producers. So it's pretty straightforward. The only thing that might get a little confusing is that many fair trade organizations actually play both roles as wholesalers and retailers, because they're huge fair trade organizations that have been around since the beginning of the movement in the US. So we're talking about like 10,000 villages. They have been around since the 40s. They have been building the fair trade movement for a long time. They are a wholesaler, but they have many retail locations across the US and Canada. Global Gifts, we are just 4 stores strong. We have one in Bloomington, 2 in Indy, and 1 in Columbus, Ohio. We are primarily a retailer, but we are a wholesaler to 1 small artisan group in Kenya. So definitely can play both roles. At Global Gifts, we are primarily a retailer. Does anybody have any questions about how we get product? All right. So now we'll talk a little bit about who we represent. I'm going to introduce you to just some of the artisan groups that you'll see represented in the store. Overall, we have approximately 40 countries represented in the store, which adds up to about 85 fair trade wholesalers, which then represents thousands of artisans, farmers, and producers. So although we are a tiny store and we might just have 4 store locations, we make a huge impact in the Midwest in the fair trade movement and being able to connect with so many artisans and producers. And so here are the countries represented. You can see that primarily we are in Africa, Asia, Central and South America, a little bit in the Middle East, and we have a couple of retailers from the US. So you might look at these countries and be like, yeah, these are countries I would associate with extreme poverty, people being in unfortunate circumstances. And it is important to think about why we see these areas of the world or these country names and we associate it with extreme poverty. There really is a historical reason to that. Many of these areas of the world have a long, long history of colonialism. And we might think of colonialism being as a faraway thing in a history textbook, but it really never went away. We just, instead of calling it colonialism, we've just turned it into a trading system in which we still exploit and underpay the people who are producing our food and the goods we buy on a daily basis. And of course, colonialism, really at the root of it at the core of it is racism. So racism is a huge cause, if not the main cause, for extreme poverty internationally. Of course, all the artisans that we work with almost are all people of color. So when we're thinking about why we're here in a fair trade organization, why we're addressing extreme poverty, it's really important to remember that racism is the issue at the core of all of it. And to keep that at the forefront of our minds so that we can be good representatives in our community for racial justice. Does anyone have any questions or comments about all of that? No? Okay. Sorry, it looked like you're about to say something. And of course, there's more opportunities to have these conversations as you volunteer along the way. All right, so artisans and our products. Hi, puppy. All right. So first we have Global Mamas, which is a great example of gender equity. They work primarily, as the name implies, with moms. I know, I see you. And many of these moms are single mothers that need income. Many have actually been diagnosed with HIV or AIDS, which just like here in the US has a huge stigma behind it. And so let's watch a video from Global Mamas so that you can get a bit of an artisan perspective.
design assistant. In my job, I work with the designers, assist, I take training, and I manage samples for the camera. I help the quality control people to check the packaging because whenever it's a first product, they don't have any idea. So I help them to guide them so that they will be able to be on track. When the mamas come in to pick the cloth, firstly, I walk through the colors with them. I will explain some certain things to them because maybe there's a design image that needed not to turn upside down, so I'll explain that portion. When I explain some certain things for them, like teaching them how to place the patterns on the fabric, at times it's hard for them, but because I've been trained how to handle people, so I know how to talk, and then they also feel good, and then they're happy about that. And I'm also feel good. I done this fabric for myself, and now in the production. I find my inspiration through singing because I like hearing them singing. I'm proud of my designer.
All right. So I just like to show that video. Videos are really good and accessible ways to get more of an artisan perspective. And I really like how that video shows that, you know, Abigail came in at a pretty entry-level job and she worked her way up to where she could mentor other women. And so kind of that cycle of mentorship within the artisan group is a really cool thing to see. And let me get back to my PowerPoint here. There we go. All right, next we have good paper. If you've ever been in the store, you might have seen these cards. They often have a funny pun on them or joke. And they encompass actually two groups in the Philippines and in Rwanda. In Rwanda, they're working primarily with people that have been impacted by the Rwandan genocide. And then in the Philippines, they're working specifically with women who are escaping sex trafficking. You'll notice that that is a common story with a lot of the artisan groups that we work with. Sex trafficking is a huge issue here in the United States and really in every country. Millions of people, women, children, and men experience this issue. And so being able to escape that situation safely and also have an alternative income is really crucial. And many of these people, you know, have either been forced into that situation or, you know, they are promised a certain income and then they do not receive it. They're just trying to provide for themselves and survive. And so having a more ethical alternative and safe alternative is a really crucial part, and that greatly represents a part of safe and empowering working conditions. Haitian drum art. So if you've ever been in our store and looked up towards the ceiling, we have these huge, beautiful pieces that are made out of oil steel drums from Haiti. They literally split open steel drums, hammer them flat, hand cut them, hammer in all the little textures and details and lines, and many of them end up being hand painted. So these are incredible pieces of art. It's actually a tradition that's been around in Haiti for many, many years. And having that fair trade connection helps them sustain it. And I would show you this video. For the sake of time, I'm not going to, but I'm going to share this PowerPoint with you. And I really encourage you all to go back and check that out. All right, then we have Bright Endeavors. This is actually one of our US-based groups that we work with. Of course, we are focused on international extreme poverty as an organization. But we recognize that there are many organizations right here in the US that are basically applying the fair trade model to their own communities. And Bright Endeavors is one of those. So they work specifically with young women as a transition program. They go through 12 weeks of intensive job training, build their resume, get some education along with it, and that helps them go to the next step for them. So whether that's continuing their education or getting that job, Bright Endeavors is an incredible program to help women just get to the next step. And they make these beautiful candles if you've ever seen them in the store. All right, lastly, we have Creation Hive. Creation Hive is the artisan group in Kenya that we are a wholesaler for. And so we've been a wholesaler for Creation Hive since 2014. And we actually are Executive Director Elisa had the honor of going to Kenya right before the pandemic in January of 2020, before we knew COVID was going to be a thing. So that was perfect timing. And we were able to build our relationship a little bit better, do some product development. And so we're really excited and honored to be a part of this group. They work specifically with people with chronic illness or disability. Many of them are HIV, AIDS positive. Many of them are actually cancer survivors or cancer patients. And so it helps cover their medical bills and make sure they have access to health care. So that's really the core goal of Creation Hive. All right. Any questions, comments, confessions so far? All right, cool. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about coffee and chocolate. So we've talked mostly about goods that we just buy on a daily basis, but fair trade commodities, fair trade agriculture is a huge part of the movement and also needs to be mentioned. So why fair trade commodities matter? So farmers, especially around the world, face a particularly unique set of challenges. So of course, they're experiencing extreme poverty, but it's really because of all these other issues that they are experiencing that. So we might, mention or hear about climate change. We might see some of those impacts here in our Bloomington community, but farmers are at the forefront of climate change. They're particularly vulnerable to climate change and disease because it directly impacts their income, which is that agricultural goods. They have low and volatile market prices. So the market prices are constantly fluctuating. There is not a sustainable income for farmers. There is rampant unregulated working conditions, and especially child labor. Child labor is relevant in all industries, but especially in agriculture. And with labor right abuses, these are things like no guarantee of a 5-day work week, no weekends, there's no 8-hour day, there's no break, there's no safety precautions for the agricultural tools that you're using. There really is no regulation or rights guaranteed for these farmers. And all of this is leading to generations leaving farming in search of a better life. Of course, this does not seem like a sustainable thing that you would want to go into. But that also means that farms are incredibly short-handed, which also puts more stress and more long work hours on farmers. And so when talking about fair trade, we like to talk a lot about coffee and chocolate because it's two things that us people in the United States just are obsessed with. Maybe we eat it or drink it on a daily basis. And so about 2/3 of our world's cacao supply comes from West Africa, where more than 2 million children were engaged in child labor. So just switching over to fair trade chocolate means you're not contributing to that. And that is just in West Africa. That does not contribute to all the other areas of the world that produce not just cacao, but other agricultural goods as well. And with coffee, it's really the same story. Of course, there's child labor, but also coffee has this huge tendency for the market prices to just be jumping up and down all over the place. And with fair trade, as we'll talk on the next slide, there is that guaranteed wage where you're not experiencing this constant fluctuation. And so what is fair trade doing differently in agricultural industry? Of course, no child labor. Child labor is a major non-compliance, but also, as we talked about earlier, when parents are actually earning income, there is not a need for children to work. Fair prices for those agricultural goods, workers' rights, so those safety precautions and rules I was talking about, those guaranteed time off and breaks. You have fair trade premiums. So premiums basically are annual bonuses that you're given, the farmers are given to use in their communities as they please. So whether that is to create a new school, create a program for the elderly, do a sustainability project, create a new well for water. Fair trade premiums are just used at the discretion of the farmers in a fair trade co-op. We have those fair trade floor prices. So that's that guaranteed market price for your agricultural goods, even if the market price dips far below that. There's strict sustainability methods in fair trade. And of course, this all leads to much healthier and more educated communities when you're not exposed to chemicals, you have breaks, you have safety regulations, you have income. That's going to have a huge, tremendous impact for the people on these farms. All right, so we're going to watch one more video of a farmer's perspective on a cacao farm.
Mon cacao, c'est mon champ à moi. C'est pas pour mon mari, c'est pour moi. C'est ma maman qui m'a donné la terre. Je vois que fait nous aide beaucoup dans la cacaoculture. La prime fait nous aide beaucoup, nous les femmes. Moi, par exemple, moi, en tant que secrétaire SG des femmes, je compte faire une maison. Même si c'est 2 chambres salon, c'est mon souhait. J'ai des briques, j'ai bâti des briques avec ma brique. Et j'ai de l'engrais avec ma brique. Nous, on veut chacune d'entre nous avoir notre liberté, avoir nous-mêmes nos propres maisons. Nous construisons des grosses maisons et puis dormir dedans à l'aise avec nos maris et nos enfants. On remercie Faites beaucoup de doubler, de lutter contre nous toujours. On est avec lui. Merci. Vive!
All right. So I like to show that video. I think it's really cool to see a primarily woman-ran co-op and seeing how those women are taking their premiums and reinvesting it in their communities the way they see fit. So just a really cool producer perspective there. All right, so we are really lucky to have a lot of options in here in the Bloomington community. So sometimes when I talk to people about fair trade, they're like, that's all fine and great, but I'm a little overwhelmed on where to start and how to process all this information and what that means for me. And so if you drink coffee, if you eat chocolate, start with that. Take that baby step. That's an easy change in your daily life that has a huge domino effect, as we've already discussed, for the people that produce these goods. And so not just with chocolate, of course, you can buy chocolate and coffee at Global Gifts, but in your local grocery stores too, look at your fair trade labels. And if you want to support local and fair trade, we have plenty of coffee roasters that support the fair trade movement as well. Hopscotch, Need More, and now Sober Joe Coffee all have fair trade options. And so there's plenty you can do in your daily actions. It's just kind of rethinking about what you're doing and where you're investing your money. All right, so now we are finally to volunteering, which is why you're here. So thank you for listening so far. In the last 15 minutes, we're going to talk about why volunteering matters and what to expect. So we literally could not exist without you. At the core history of Global Gifts, we are based on volunteers. Global Gifts was actually founded by volunteers in a church basement over 30 years ago. Volunteers helped build our desk and make our break areas in almost every single store. And so you are all at the core of what we do. Not only that, you make it possible for us to be open 7 days a week, for us to have evening hours, for us to continue to buy from wholesalers. You all are the only reason that we buy from 85 fair trade vendors and get shipments every week. So you make a tremendous impact in who we are as an organization. So who are volunteers at Global Gifts? You all are sales associates and customer service experts. So you're going to, of course, do those daily customer service things, run the register, help us process inventory. But the second half of what you do, which is just as important, is that you all are fair trade educators, you're fair trade advocates. And by just attending this orientation, you already know a lot more about fair trade than the general public, believe it or not. So you can utilize that knowledge already to start conversations and hopefully start those conversations in the store as well. So what can you expect as a volunteer? Obviously, greeting customers, helping them find the perfect gift. You're going to interact with a lot of different personalities. So, you know, everyone is so great. We have a really great community of customers in the Bloomington community, but expect a lot of different personalities coming through. Share your knowledge about artisan groups or product, operate the cash register, wrap gifts. I mentioned those weekly shipments. You might have a shipment come in during your shift, so you're going to help receive and label and put out all that merchandise, assist with arranging displays, help clean the store, keep it orderly, and also offer your unique talents if you'd like. If you're really good at social media or displays, or you know, you're like, I just think I have a good way to change the way we're doing something with receiving, just speak up. We want to hear what your input is and what other talents you have, and hopefully we can utilize those as well. So sometimes we have the non-exciting things, so the dress code, but this is still important. We are pretty casual, so there shouldn't be too much that you have to worry about here. I usually say if you wouldn't wear it to work, don't wear it to the store. But we're comfortable, store appropriate casual clothing. Jeans are totally fine. We just ask that there's no excessive tears, rips, or holes. 1 or 2 holes is okay, just not tears from top to bottom. Shorts just above the knee are totally fine. No athletic wear or spaghetti straps. No clothing with logos or writing unless it is related to Global Gifts or fair trade. The only reason we ask that is because if you have, you know, a big label on your shirt and that company is in no way related to the fair trade movement, we don't want to really have conflicting values kind of represented in the store. So save that favorite label for outside of volunteering. Wear comfortable shoes. Open-toed shoes are totally okay, just none of the plastic flip-flops. And we do ask no strong perfumes or colognes just because we have some customers and some other volunteers with some allergies. Any questions or concerns about dress code? All right. Another not so exciting slide, parking. Does everyone have a plan for how they're going to get to the store?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So we're feeling good about that. If you don't feel good about this, please talk to me. I'm also gonna give you a handout that has all of this information listed. All right, breaks, especially if you're working that awesome 4.5-hour shift in our morning. We want to offer you a break, of course. So you have approximately 15 minutes in the back room to rest and eat. We have a mini fridge, microwave, tea, water. So be ready to bring your food from home if you are going to be at the store for a while. Store schedule. So we ask new volunteers to commit to a minimum of 3 months of volunteering. The reason we ask for 3 months is because it does take a little while to get you trained and comfortable out on the sales floor. So if that's all the time you're able to give, then that wasn't very fun for you and you didn't get to actually volunteer. And that was like kind of a bummer for us too, because we spent all this time training and then you didn't get to be put on the schedule. So 3 months is really ideal for new volunteers. And we just ask for 2 shifts per month. So more is great and highly appreciated, but we do have that 2 shift minimum. Scheduling procedures and policy. So scheduling is a huge thing for us as a nonprofit that is also a retailer. So we are really dependent on people knowing when their schedule and actually arriving to their shifts. In other volunteer opportunities, it might be a situation where it's like, oh, you come or you don't come, it's not, it's not going to change the day necessarily. For us, it really does. So when I submit those schedules every month, knowing your schedule, when you're supposed to come in is really valuable and important to us. So it's a volunteer's responsibility to review the schedule and record your own shifts. Find a sub if needed. Of course, I help with that. Call the store if you're going to be late, just so we know that you're on the way. If it's not an emergency situation, like you got homework or you just really want to go hang out with your friends, or there's a special event you found out about last minute, those aren't considered emergencies. And so we're going to expect you to still come to your shift. But of course, emergency situations are totally different. You can't control emergencies. You can't control if you get sick. You can't control family issues. You can't control those things. So in emergency situations, just please contact the store as soon as possible. Give us a quick call so we know what's going on. And so, yeah, there's just a certain responsibility to keep track, keep communicating with me on what's going on, so that we have a robust and successful source schedule when we need it. Does anybody have questions or concerns about scheduling? Okay.
Oh, I actually have one quick question. Sorry.
Yeah.
Do you normally send out like a tentative schedule in case there's like things maybe we can't make the shift that you put us down on?
Yes, exactly. Okay. So I'll go over this with you in your training, but basically you submit your availability. I create a tentative schedule that I then share with everyone, and you have a few days to review that schedule, make sure that all looks good to you. And that's also your grace period to let me know, oh, hey, that's not actually going to work, and I will take you off the shift.
Okay,
yes,
thanks.
Great question.
And Melissa, that's the schedule's done for a month at a time?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. So volunteer appreciation program. We just want to let you know that we do have this. So for all your purchases at one time, you have 15% off always when you buy in our shop, 30% discount on clothing. And each month on top of that, I am keeping track of the schedule and what you do in the store. They're volunteer points. And then when you earn 10 points, you get a $15 Global Gifts gift card, which is super exciting. And so you get a point for completing your shifts, 1 additional point for subbing for someone, taking extra shifts, 3 points for referring a new volunteer. 5 points for just completing your training, and sometimes just special bonus points because you did something super awesome. So a lot of people over the course of a few months earn these 10 points, and that's another way that we like to show our appreciation for you. All right, and here we have some data on our volunteer impact. This is obviously outdated. This is 2019. 2020 was not a normal volunteer year with the pandemic. There were even months that we had no volunteers at the very beginning of the worst of COVID. But here's what a normal year looks like. In total, for all 4 stores, 15,164 hours were worked. In Bloomington alone, 4,131 hours were put in. So you all make a tremendous impact in us being successful for the year.
And there's 82 volunteers in Bloomington. That seems like a lot of people.
So this was the total volunteers over the course of the year. We don't, in my time, we've never had 82 volunteers at one time. And so this is the fluctuating over the year, and our total for 2019 was 82. In ideal times, we have 30 to 35 volunteers. Still recovering from the pandemic, that's fluctuating around 20 volunteers. All right. And lastly, but not least, enjoy volunteering and have fun. We love to have fun in the store. When you volunteer, we love to connect with you, learn about you. We always call it like Global Gifts family. We're looking for ways to laugh or play funny pranks or just enjoy our time together. Remember that this is highly interactive volunteering position. Come being excited to share our mission and artisan stories. And also be open and be proactive to learn about more opportunities to learn about artisan groups and fair trade as well. It really is what you make out of it. And that is everything. 2 minutes under an hour. I did it. So thank you so much for coming. Sometime tomorrow afternoon, I'm going to be sending you this presentation. Sending you a scheduling document and some fair trade resources. And in the email, I'll be describing next steps, and you can reach out to me to let me know when you would like to come in for trainings and get started. Does anybody have questions?
I just have one more. Sorry. I feel like
no, you're good.
I was curious just what the current like COVID policy is. Are you
yes.
There's still capacity and are masks required still?
Yes, thank you for asking that. So yes, when you all come in, I'll be sharing an updated COVID-19 safety policy with you all that was just released from our executive director. We are still encouraging staff and volunteers to remain masked. Just to kind of set a standard of safety. Our store is pretty small, so 6 feet cannot really be maintained when we're behind the register or processing a big order. So that additional mask really helps to just, keep things extra safe in the store. Starting July 1st, we will be moving forward with the rest of downtown business. To instead of masks required for customers to masks encouraged. And for me, it's like, wow, that's already happening, but it is how we are moving with all the other downtown businesses. The good news is that hopefully you all are all vaccinated. All of our team so far is all vaccinated and continue wearing masks. It'll hopefully also encourage customers to wear masks as well. Not for everyone, but at least we're setting that standard of safety. So mask wearing for staff and volunteers is highly encouraged. And then we will be moving forward to mask encouraged for customers on July 1st. Oh, and our capacity is currently 10 customers at a time.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments? All right. Well, thank you so much for coming to orientation. Of course, we'll see each other soon, but please don't hesitate to email me with any questions that come to mind. And tomorrow I will send you all those materials and we can take next steps to schedule you for trainings. All right. Awesome. Thank
That
you
sounds
so
great. Great
much.
presentation. Thank you. It was
Oh,
very interesting.
awesome. I'm glad you
Yeah.
enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Melissa.
Yeah. Thank you. You'll have a great evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Mm-hmm.